So, hello everyone. I am Melanie Mallon from Teen Skepchick, and today I will be talking with neurophysiologist Dr. Kirsten Sanford, aka Dr. Kiki, creator and co-host of the This Week in Science podcast and host of Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, among so many other producing, hosting, and writing projects that I suspect she's either mastered the ability to stop time or has cloned herself in a secret underground lab. So welcome, Dr. Kiki.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To give our audience some background, I'm wondering if you could talk a little about your trajectory in science, including the research you've done and how and why you've moved away from that and into science journalism, TV and radio, and podcasting.
Sure. So I guess I can take it. It all started. No, how many years ago? I've always been kind of a sciencey girl. So I grew up out in the country and just had a real influence from nature. Just growing up around animals, growing up in farm country, I just got to see the world and how people interact with it. And I always had a lot of questions to ask about that. And my parents were just fabulous about stimulating inquiry. So whenever I wanted to know something, they wouldn't just tell me the answer. They'd try and help me figure it out by asking the right questions.
Okay.
So, having that kind of a supportive environment growing up really really kind of put me on the trajectory that I've been on for my life. I went to UC Davis for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and as an undergraduate, I really wanted to, when I started college, I was going to save the whales. I was going to end up like part of Greenpeace and like attacking whaling ships or something. I was very idealistic. I majored in wildlife fisheries and conservation biology, and so that got me a really wonderful education in the biological sciences, ecology, biology, plant ecology even, so, not just animals, but the plant world, and just more and more. Here's the story of how things exist together, right? Towards the end of my undergraduate, I went to a summer program called Rumble, the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory, and it's a 6-week program that's open to university-level students, and it is just awesome. It's up in the mountains, the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, and you get involved in field research, you take classes, you can just go hiking, you're just immersed in nature, and you're far away from all sorts of other influences, so you really get into whatever it is you're studying there. And I found a love for birds when I was there. I took an ornithology class, went on bird walks for 6 weeks, and just fell in love with birds and the lives they have. Came back to UC Davis for my final year and decided I wanted to do research into birds. And so I found myself a lab, found a professor who was doing avian research. Turned out she was doing research into how the avian brain, the bird brain, works. And so we did behavioral studies in the lab. We also went out into the field and did some field work. And then there were the brain studies, too. So taking the brains and slicing them up and looking at how the neurons were connected and how big different regions of the brain were, and then connecting that back to the behavior that the birds were engaging in. I did this for my final year, and then I worked in that lab for over the summer, and was like, I think I really want to do this more. I love this. I just got more and more interested in the questions of, not just, okay, how does the animal interact with the environment, but how does the brain allow the animal to interact with the environment, and then how are the influences of the environment feeding back onto the animal themselves? And so I really got interested in the feedback cycles. It's not just animal in the environment and that's it. The environment has a massive impact. So anyway, I applied to graduate school, got into graduate school, stayed working in that laboratory, and the program I got into for grad school was physiology, molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology. And the coursework for that was just fascinating because it was all about how the body works.
Right.
You know, what are all the different, you know, there was coursework on neurophysiology. So how does the brain and the nerves of the body, how do they function? What are the chemical and electrical signals that are going on? You know, how does the digestive system work? Let's look at this comparatively. How do things change between different species of animals, between different families? You know, how are humans different from birds? And why are these important differences? And so looking at how everything worked from a real comparative standpoint, and also getting training and asking the questions even more of how does stuff fit together?
Right.
I just really got more and more interested in this. Okay, so this is my academic trajectory, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm working in this lab, doing the bird stuff, on and on and on. So about this time that I started graduate school, I also started This Week in Science, the radio show and podcast that I've been doing for over 10 years now. I can't believe I've been doing it so long. But I had, as an undergraduate, I got involved at the university's radio station, and I, you know, was just a music DJ during my undergraduate years. And then I was like, you know, I know people at the radio station, and my friends and I had been hanging out, just talking over the summer, and I was like, you know, all the stuff that we talk about, it's really interesting. And I bet people ask the same questions that we ask about the science that's in the news, the stuff that's in the newspaper, the stuff that you read about. Like, I bet people are asking these kinds of questions, or maybe they want to know what other people are thinking. So I approached the program director for the radio station. I was like, I'd like to do a show. Mm-hmm. And luckily there was a spot that opened up in the schedule, and they said yes. And so that's where This Week in Science started. And so I started doing this program talking about communicating science and what I was learning about, and doing it in a very general way, you know, much less, you know, jargon and scientific terminology, you know, more like anybody talking with their friends. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how I would try and explain stuff to my grandmother or my next door neighbor. And I really got into it and started liking it more and more and more. Through grad school, also started teaching, and really enjoyed teaching and interacting with people. And again, trying to explain stuff that I was learning, or get people interested to maybe ask their own questions about what was going on. Okay, so these parallel tracks, academic and the radio stuff, are kind of going on side by side. 2 years into graduate school, my advisor announced that she was going to be moving to England and not taking anyone in the lab with her. So I was kind of left without a lab to work in, which meant no birds, you know, and how they're really, when you start looking at it, science as a, you know, an academic, as people looking into questions, there are these little tiny niches, these little tiny areas that people dig more and more specifically into. So it's finer and finer detail about how the world works. So when you start talking about how many people in the United States, let alone at one university, are doing bird brain research into spatial learning and memory, which is the area that I was looking at, specifically looking at the area of the brain responsible for spatial learning and memory in birds, the hippocampus. There was nobody else at the university. I couldn't just move to a new laboratory. It wasn't that easy. So I kind of was stuck, and I didn't know what to do. I took my orals. I got to the point of passing everything except all I needed to do was finish my research and write my dissertation. Sounds easy, right? No.
Right.
Not so easy. And so I was kind of at a crossroads, and I took a leave of absence from my my university program for a year. I moved to San Francisco and I started temping, and I ended up working in a really interesting lab that I'm so glad I took the chance to work in. It was a neuropsychopharmacology lab. Basically, this was a lab that did research on human subjects into the addictive properties of recreational drugs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we would take volunteers in this lab, and if they fit the criteria, we'd accept them to the study and put them on a hospital research ward floor, and then we would administer drugs or placebo based on what the study was, and then administer psychological batteries of tests. We would administer physical tests, physiological tests, looking at changes to heart rate, skin conductance, respiratory rate, all sorts of different things. And that was just a really interesting experience, not just because of the subject matter, but working with humans is entirely different than working with birds.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Completely different. So that was just fascinating. But in the process, I've moved to San Francisco. I had to leave the radio show behind. So I left the show and left it in the hands of a couple of good friends and said, okay, I'm done with that. On with my life. I'm going to figure things out. And in the process of leaving it, I realized that that was the thing that I really enjoyed doing the most.
Okay.
So I kind of had to lose it to figure everything out. So it took a while, but I got back into doing the show again, and really started looking at ways that I could work in communications and communicating science more. How can I do this more? I started looking at stuff. There was this great program that's still going. It's the AAAS Mass Media and Engineering Fellowship, or Science and Engineering Fellowship. And this program takes university and postdoctoral students and allows them you apply to the program, and if they accept you, they put you into a newsroom at a newspaper, a magazine, now I guess websites, or television stations or radio stations around the country. And you spend 10 weeks communicating science and learning how it's done. Okay. And so it's this like a crash course in science communications. And I applied to that program and got into it, and it was I loved it. I spent my 10 weeks in New York City at WNBC. Hey. Yeah, with my mentor there was Dr. Max Gomez, and he actually had a very similar background to mine. Did neurophysiology. He was more the medical side of things, but he'd gotten into radio and started moving in a direction towards communication, and ended up in a career in reporting science on the television. So I actually ended up in a really great situation to be able to learn from him, all about communicating for television and video. And so I came back from that, went back to grad school to finish my degree so that I could have the PhD behind my name, have gone through the entire process of completing research, writing it up, getting published, doing a dissertation. And so I'd have credibility behind my name when I talk to scientists, and also when I talk to the public, so that I'm not, a lot of people say, who are you? Why should I listen to you? Right. Why do you know anything about science? Well, I've been doing it for a really long time. I have letters. They mean something.